This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites member series. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today I'm talking with Research Connector member Deborah Drucker. She's manager of prospect development at the City College of New York. Hello, Deborah. Thank you for joining me today on this special member edition of Chat Bites.
Thanks, Jen. It's really great to be here today.
Yeah, you and we've known each other for years now. LinkedIn says that we first connected in 2013. Can you believe it's been that many years?
That is really, that's a long time. It's longer than I would have figured. And I think, though, that we only met in person for the first time last year at the APRA of Greater New York conference.
This is true. Yes. And if it was any other time, it would have been APRA as well.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you have also taken courses at the Institute, and you're currently a Research Connectors member. And I have to say, just putting it out there, you are one of the best natural networkers I know. It's wonderful.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
I'm wondering if you'll share with listeners just a little bit today how you got into the field of prospect research and what your role is before we launch into our 3 questions.
Well, okay. I've actually gone into prospect research twice. The first time was in the early 90s, believe it or not. And at the time, I was working in corporate foundation relations at the University of Minnesota. And a position came up in prospect research, and the director of that area asked me if I was interested. And so I became a prospect research analyst at the University of Minnesota. And I was there for a few years. And that was pre-World Wide Web. So quite a bit of time has passed since then. And then I got into the field again later when I was in New York City in 2004, working for the Cooper Union. And in that case, I'd actually been working at a law firm, another thing that we actually have in common, I think, and had gone to a seminar at the Foundation Center. And I was inspired to get back into the fundraising field at that time. So that's how I moved back into the field.
Wow.
Yeah. Right now, I'm working as the prospect research manager for the City College of New York, which is the oldest of the colleges in the 24-college City University of New York system. I have a very personal connection with City College. Both of my parents were alumni here. So that has really made me very, very interested in what the college is doing in moving up students who are first generation, who come from lower income backgrounds, or who come from an immigrant background into middle class jobs, which is a lot of what we do here.
That's wonderful. And what a world of change you've seen over even just your prospect research career.
Oh, yes, definitely a lot of change.
That's wonderful. Well, then you are very well equipped to answer 3 questions I have for you today. And the first is, what are 3 of your favorite resources to keep current in fundraising and prospect research?
Oh, no, I only get 3. Well, first, I really should mention, as you noticed, that in the 1990s, we really didn't have the avalanche of resources that we have now. So now picking 3 is difficult. Then finding 3 probably would have been difficult. Obviously, the Prospect Research Institute and your blog is one of my favorites, if not my favorite resource. But I'll give you 3 other ones as well. The first, I think, would be APRA International and all things APRA, in particular Connections and the Prospect L listserv. I actually have a lot of the old APRA Connections in PDF form, and Connections just has so many great pieces. One of them, I think, recently was a piece on developing a connection score by Melissa Ontoko of Bensueli-Flessner. And that was really useful for me because I'm working on developing that kind of score right now in my position. There are also a number of good blogs, but the one I read consistently every issue is Helen Brown's The Intelligent Edge. And one of the things I really love about it is that sometimes the posts are kind of general discussions that take step back and make us think about subjects that really impact our field in a broader way. And then sometimes the posts take a real deep dive into specific resources or specific techniques. A few weeks ago, there was a piece on exclusive golf club memberships, which I didn't really know very much about, and that was a real goldmine of information. There was also a piece recently on genealogy, which had a couple of resources that I really wasn't using. So I find that blog to really be helpful in my work as well. My third favorite resource is other researchers. We have so many online resources, but it's very important to connect with other researchers and fundraisers face-to-face. We know in our field how important in-person meetings are in major gifts fundraising, but I think sometimes we need to remember that it's also important for us professionally. And the best way to meet other researchers is at conferences and in-person workshops. In my case, I've been unable to go to APRA International in the last couple of years, so I'm very lucky to have a great local chapter conference, the ProspectCon conference, which is hosted by APRA of Greater New York. And they do a wonderful job of keeping me up to date on issues and trends in the field.
Wow, great, good stuff. And not necessarily related to work, my second question is what book, so on any topic, do you recommend that everyone read? And just one.
Everyone read, and just one. I won't give you my entire library because that would be a many hours discussion. I think one of the most helpful books I've read as a researcher is actually not about prospect research or fundraising. It's a book called Influence Without Authority, and it's by Alan Cohen and Daniel Bradford. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, it's on my bookshelf, and it's all your fault.
It is? It's all my fault. Okay. It's about how to get help or cooperation from someone when you don't have formal authority over them, or even sometimes if you do. So it's about managing up, but also managing sideways and diagonally. And their framework is based on reciprocity and doing a deep analysis of other people's circumstances or needs, interests, goals. And what the authors call this are currencies. So finding out what is most important to each individual and figuring out how you can meet that need. They're very different. Some people want inspiration, some want recognition or concrete help with procuring resources, maybe a feeling of belonging or connection. And it's important to sort of figure out where people are coming from in that area. I've got a great example of that. And a few years back, I had a colleague in the finance department at our organization, and I just couldn't seem to build a good relationship with him. I needed information from him all the time, and it was really difficult to get it. So I thought, okay, what can I do to improve this situation? I started trying to connect with him by talking to him about things outside of work, general conversation. And I actually made the situation worse. He stopped answering my emails and calls altogether at that point. And later what happened was I was taking an accounting course and I got stuck on a particular homework problem. And I went to him rather trepidatious about this, and I asked him if he would do me a favor and take a look and point me in the right direction. And then after that, he became my best friend. And what I figured out is what he really wanted from me was for me to recognize his expertise. He didn't want small talk. He didn't want me asking him for things all the time. He wanted me to recognize him as an expert. That was the thing that was important. And the ironic thing is that I'd been avoided asking questions about finance that weren't strictly necessary for my work, but just things I was curious about. He loved talking about what the finance department does and how nonprofit accounting works. That was his currency. And it's funny because I had avoided the very thing that eventually improved our working relationship. So that's just one example that I got from this book. I found it incredibly useful.
Wow, that's a wonderful example. It felt so counterintuitive, but in fact...
Very much so, yes.
Well, the reason I know about the book is because you were taking the Approach to Prospecting course.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to work with our frontline fundraisers in a way that they feel comfortable with. So we need to match them. And especially with sort of that analytical approach, we have to have their help in defining what the problem is. So,
Exactly. And their needs may not be exactly the same as ours. For one thing, they're very often under a lot of pressure to meet metrics, and we need to understand and be respectful of that.
yes, absolutely. Okay, well, question number 3. How do you manage FOMO, the fear of missing out, in our hyper-connected digital world?
I love the concept of FOMO. I think I'm going to put it on a t-shirt sometimes. Um, I think my first answer to this question is that I've learned to give myself a break. I think we need to start with the assumption that we're going to miss things. The amount of information that we deal with as researchers on a daily basis can be absolutely exhausting. When I first started working as a researcher, it really bothered me if another staff member brought up an article or some information that I hadn't seen first. I thought, I'm the researcher, I should be the source of all information, and I have failed at this. And now I think, great, thank you for making my job easier. So I think instead of thinking I have to be the source of all information, I've learned to educate my coworkers on what kind of prospect and donor information is useful to us. For an example, I knew a database administrator who read every line of the Wall Street Journal during her 2-hour commute every day. And I do mean every line, including the ads, everything. And she would forward me articles that she thought would be useful to me. And that was so helpful because then if I missed something in the Wall Street Journal, I knew that Anna Marie would pick it up. So I didn't have to worry about that. I also had a development associate at a former job who read the sports pages in 3 or 4 different newspapers every day. He was a sports fanatic. And he was actually interested in prospect research. And even though he didn't have a job in my area, he would feed me leads all the time, which was very helpful to me because I don't have a wide-ranging knowledge about sports figures and sports. Something else that has helped me a great deal, a few years ago, actually it was probably many, many years ago, I was at a presentation by Cecilia Hogan. And she was talking about information overload in this presentation. And she had this great analogy. She talked about standing in a river with your arms stretched out and catching what floats by in the river. And the idea that you can't catch everything. And I actually think about that analogy a lot. It's almost a meditative thing for me. It's very helpful to kind of calm down about everything that's out there, that you don't have to get all of it. I think the other thing is that it's helpful to be very focused and selective about how you get your information. We all look at social media a lot. There's a lot out there for us on social media, but I would say stay away from general news feeds. On Twitter, I tend to search with tags. I look at the news feeds of thought leaders and people whose news feeds I have found useful. I limit my time. I sometimes set an alarm so I don't spend too much time on that. I use a lot of alerts and I reevaluate them on a regular basis because sometimes you set them up and then you realize that you're getting a lot of forwarding, you're getting a lot of articles that just aren't really useful. And I would say also to develop a short list of your basic resources and stick with them on a daily basis. Break down what you need to know into subject areas and come up with only 1 or 2 reliable resources for each. As an example, for local business news, I just skim through Cranes and the New York Times headlines every day. And I have an alert set up for local Harlem business news, which I need to be knowledgeable about also. And I just recognize I can't read everything, so I don't try to look at everything. I think sometimes trying to look at everything, you'll wind up knowing less instead of more.
Wonderful tactics. Yeah, because once you need to know more, you can always dig in. But until then, you're picking out the highlights that are important to you and your work. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Also, just in terms of self-care, I really recommend disconnecting once in a while, to get away from the phone and the internet. I actually go on a yoga retreat every summer, and I leave my phone and laptop at home. It's a really good break. And then when I do reconnect with social media and with media generally, I find I'm much more able to approach the avalanche of information in a much more focused way. So I find that helpful as well.
All right, yoga retreats. I'm in. We could do that. Well,
come with me.
I should. Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today and answering my 3 questions.
Great. It's been really fun talking to you, Jen, as always.
That was Research Connector member Deborah Drucker, Manager of Prospect Development at the City College of New York. And fear not, the great resources she mentioned will be included in the show notes so you can find them easily. Hey there! If you enjoyed this member interview, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with incredible people, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member. I'll see you there.